Always hung out with the girls. Always hung out with the girls. Always hung out with the girls. The girls, they accepted me.
I'm doing fine. He, him pronouns for no particular purpose whatsoever.
I'm pretty good. A little tired, but pretty good. I stayed up way too late last night. I was watching Jupiter Ascending with Lady Night, which is a bonkers film. And I'll probably talk about it at some point. Oh. I want to be clear. I love the film. It is not a good film, but I love it.
Hi, I'm Christy. Pronouns are she, her. And are we still doing descriptions? I'm redhead with a guitar in the picture. I have. Well, I'm very sick right now, so as I am in November's, and I'm pronouns are she, her for the purpose of not having an infinite crisis nor a final crisis, just a dark crisis.
A dark crisis. That's kind.
Sorry. We were
Well, the space for the captioning is reserved on the screen. I can tell you that. So
What?
that part's working. I can't attest to what the sound is like on YouTube at this point.
Okay, that's why the captions weren't working. Wait. I can't hear you guys. Wait. I don't know. Has it just been...
Well, none of us were speaking right at that moment, but can you hear us now?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, no, I could hear you. I just... Okay, no, you've been showing up. I'm pretty sure you've been showing up, but my voice has not been showing up for some reason, and that's why the closed captionings weren't showing up. Hi, I'm Ozma In The Dark, utilizing she, they pronouns for the purposes of rewriting my technical problems and pretending they didn't exist with my... I got a bunch of nerdy shirts that were cheap. It's like Hogwarts, but it's like the TMNT thing.
Okay.
It was... Look, I got a lot of random shirts. Anyway. Words. I lost my train of thought now because I'm just
redoing the introduction.
No, I think they could hear you the whole time. I'm
But
pretty
they couldn't
sure.
hear you.
Yeah, because the setting was in default, and default wasn't my microphone for some reason.
Oh, okay.
And I think I saw you guys to some degree before with the voices, so I feel like the audience probably heard you the whole time. Just mention if you couldn't hear everyone else's introduction, and I can ask if possible. Anyways, we are here to talk about. You did a video, Aranock, about.
We're being told that our audio is cleaned by Context Wrench, who isn't wrenched, by the way.
Oh, I forgot. That's because of a different account set up. One moment. I forgot about that factor. We're talking about, now my brain is fizzing out. You mentioned it in your video recently, Aranock.
We're very professional here.
Oh, it's all good. My most recent video is called Queer Relativity. It's a piece on time and queerness and our relationships between that and language. And it's also sort of a unofficial paper on defining what that term is. So it's a video essay, but it's kind of a film. But it's kind of an art piece, but it's kind of media criticism. It's hard to describe. It just is what my stuff is. I saw it as a person who's not you, and I can't read your. I don't know. I took it as sort of a personal story about. Your stuff conveyed through a variety of artistic mediums, and I don't know, there's a lot of it is very much an artistic piece in its own way. It's yeah, I don't know, I think it would maybe the best, like if we were doing like fancy art criticism definitions, you could call it a meta modern film, but like which if you don't know what that term means and stuff, I'm not sure I'm the best person to describe it, but I would recommend the Leftist Cooks video on the multiverse. That's not really about the multiverse, it's more about metamodernism, but it uses multiverse media to explain what metamodernism is, which is sort of a commentary on
I feel like I need to take
both
notes,
modernism and postmodernism,
because I'm terrible at remembering names, and if my office it's going to cover the screen. Of course it does.
There you go.
You see, you just need to say I perceive it as being a meta-modern indictment of capitalism.
Well, I mean,
There we go.
you could easily say it's that as well. It's I never restrict myself to talking about one thing. So I guess my question is, what do you want to talk about? What interests you about the video? What questions?
Well, I mean, so I mean, the general thought process, because you bring up almost like a different communication of time. I mean, you used Dr. Manhattan's way of talking about time, which makes sense, but isn't how the English language tends to be organized.
No, it does. It isn't, and that's kind of the point. I'm like I really, at two different points in my life, for two very, very different reasons, connected with that way of expressing time. And I talk about both in the video. The first being just like when I read the comic, and emotionally hit, but I didn't understand why. And then the second time, was, sorry, my voice is like, it's going low. I don't want it to be low. The second time was when I watched Sophie's video, Being Seen. And so it worked really well because I was able to make that point about like queer language given to other queer people helps us understand ourselves by using that language style and then looking at, you know, the way that Sophie's video, which was also a coming out video, sort of affected me and my understanding and gave me that sort of language to understand myself in time. Thanks, Context Wrench.
Yeah. I was just gonna say.
So yeah, it was trying to get that idea across. And one of my favorite types of comments I've gotten on the video is people using that format to respond to the video, kind of. It's very cute, it's very sweet. And I mean, some of them are just like short things, like it's, you know, this day and I'm watching a video or whatever, but like some of them like really engaged with that language style in a way that was like, it was cool to see. It was cool to see that I could even just inspire that little bit of poetry in my comment section from people. I don't think people get, even when you're fairly big account, like if you're a big enough account, you just start ignoring the comments tab, kind of, because it's a little too hard to keep track of. I know that from friends of mine who have much bigger channels, but I see every comment. They all show up for me. Like, even the ones that get auto banned get sent to the, you know, for review, which is nice. I can go, you know, go through and ban all the creeps. And the 5 people that accidentally used one of the trigger words that I have in my ban list.
Or the bots were trying to sell like sexy times or whatever.
Those happen sometimes.
I hate those. No, I hate them. Legit, I have a small channel, so small channels I feel like almost it gets more annoying because like you don't get any comments. So you're like, ooh, what's this? And it's just like, oh. Oh.
The one of the concept of queer time is something that I've been living that I'm very familiar with. Or as I've commented, one of the reasons we walk fast is because we wasted so much time before.
That's a really good way of putting it.
Yeah. Yeah, I walk at queer speed.
Darn it! Now my brain is being terrible, and I'm just like my story's boring, and it's just like, and my brain's trying to do the thing, and it's just like, yeah, it's like some day because I don't pay attention to days in 2010. I'm trying to get bottom surgery. Oh, it's someday 5 years later. I'm trying to get bottom surgery. Oh, it's. Someday, 10 years later, I'm trying to get bottom surgery.
No,
I am getting bottom surgery in February, so
congrats.
I'm doing
That's awesome.
hiatus from a lot of the stuff I do.
It's really funny because it was sort of like doing investigative work about myself and my past. I just would going back through things, like going through old Facebook posts, going through like all these, like it was basically just doing this like deep dive investigation into my history and old files into my old and like it was funny because it like a lot of those dates are bang on correct. I know for a fact. Like I have the solid, like the one that was the biggest shock to me was going back to the old photos and things and realizing that the photo of me putting that feminine top on was 3 days before I did the Rorschach cosplay. And I was like, that's too fitting. That's too weird that it happened 3 days apart. Like that this thing that I talk about is a representation of sort of you know, hyper performing masculinity, even as just a cosplay, was 3 days after that. Like, it's very interesting going back through your own history and digging through things. And
I'm bored. I'm making you a moderator too now.
But yeah, so I think it's. I mean, if you want, I can talk a little bit about the process of writing, because it was a very iterative work. The initial bit of the work was way before it was called Queer Relativity, way before it even was about that concept. Was just, I had wanted to write a video at some point about linguistics and gender, just based off of all of the writing and research I'd already done for a class on the topic. It was actually funny. I took this 200 level linguistics, and then the professor was basically like, please come take my 400 gender and language class. I want you to come do that. Because you're very good about this. And because it was it was the sociolinguistics class. And I love that professor. One of my favorite types of professors, just old angry Russian lady. Very, like, it's not mean, just like at a baseline seems angry, is not angry, genuinely a sweet human being, but just like also gives no shits. Like, she would just say things because she just knows she's been on tenure, like she's, you know, been there forever, does not care if it's a university. And just I remember her saying something about asking trans people like ridiculous questions and being like, don't fucking do that. I was like, yes. Iconic. This is lecturing material I can get behind.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I had that going on, and I wanted to take that into a video at some point. And then I quite literally was in the shower, and I just had this thought. I had like 3 thoughts in a row that became the video, which was I don't know why I was thinking about Dr. Manhattan, but I was just like, you know, I wonder if like the reason behind Dr. Manhattan experiencing time differently is like language, but not in like the strictest like way that most people think of language, right? Is that he understands like the language of the universe, sort of. And then the second thought was, boy, that makes me think of Aranock. And then the sort of third thought was just because I think I started thinking about Dr. Manhattan because I was thinking about my own memories, and I was like, I wonder if that applies to queer temporality. And then I just started writing stuff. So I was like that line about being in the shower and writing. That is actually true. I was in the shower with my phone like this, like trying to type out all this stuff before I forget it, because I was like half done. I've got like conditioner in my hair and like.
Oh no.
It's okay. You're supposed to let conditioner sit anyway. So.
Yeah, I do not have the attention for that. No, it was interesting, like to be able to write while in the shower, although I don't take a shower enough. It's just to keep all the writing thoughts so I can write it down more easily. No, the interesting thing is because I think one of the I think big differences is I don't know what it is about my life, but like I don't know, I've never framed stuff in terms of destroying the past self type thing to let the new self survive, or not survive, but to grow, to like the rebirth thing. You mentioned it with the Dark Souls 3 reference as well. I think, I don't know, because Christy, you've said something similar too.
Yeah, it's I'm used to living in a temporal weird zone anyway, so it's okay, because there's like questions all I've had years ago, and they're just in a pile of questions that someday will get answered. And that changes my past to begin with. Because, okay, this is what this part of my past, this is what this piece of my past meant. So now I can integrate that into my memory of that. That's what I was thinking of in there. But yeah, like I wrote a song real early in transition called "I'm Still Me," and I don't really stand behind it anymore because I'm not. Christopher is not a thing that exists anymore. I just happen to share memories.
I think that's an interesting way of putting it. That's a nice way of putting it. Of I share memories with that person. Like, it is a weird experience because it's like I do feel so holistically disconnected from who that person was in a lot of ways. Like when I was much younger, for a long list of reasons, but part of it is definitely transition, and it's that like they still exist though. They exist in conversation with the me that is now, you know? And I think I couldn't tell you where like one ends, like one version of the self sort of ends and one begins. It's just sort of but you know when they're different. Like, you know, internally when you think about certain memories where you're like, I was just a very different person then. Like I can't, it's that thing of like,
I mean,
those
I
memories,
guess
those actions, whatever, I feel just disconnected completely from them. But I don't think it's a universal thing. I don't think everybody has that experience, nor do I think they need to.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, I wasn't trying to, just to be clear, I wasn't trying to say that
no,
you were
you're
trying
okay.
to
I just was
determine.
yeah,
No, it was just on my mind too, because like, I don't know if it was also just that I didn't have the same pressures in terms of what it means to be a person, not from my family. I definitely did from outside the family, but my parents were fine if I wore like lipstick and nail polish, and they're probably fine if I had I just don't think they knew how to deal with me being trans, and a lot of that felt a lot more like an imaginary fantasy realm. But like, to be fair, I had no icons to go to like that. I had like The World According to Garp, the book, which I read. I never saw the movie, and the book is really focuses on the trans woman being a bald football player, ex-football player. And then the other thing is like one of the late night Maury type shows where you have the freaks enter into the thing. Sorry about the language usage. I'm just trying to, that's sort of the vibe they tended to present, that these are the others that you shouldn't want to be.
Yeah, I mean, even myself, you know, growing up in the 2000s, like I don't think I witnessed positive trans representation until I was nearing the end of high school, probably, or just out of high school. Like it really is that sparse. If you go and look them up, there's a lot of terrible representation. There's a lot of harmful representation. There's a lot of dead bodies on random investigation shows. Disclosure, I would highly recommend people watch that if they haven't. Is a really great documentary on the history of trans performers in Hollywood and trans representation and
very good.
Yes.
Like, so
I love that.
Yeah. So I grew up in a time where I think most often what I saw of other trans people wasn't other trans people. It was Well, I mean, it was the Family Guy joke that I was talking about. I mean, it's not literally just that. I use that as a representation because I do think it is relevant now more so than some of those other ones, in that like Seth MacFarlane is still trying to write trans stories and things with stuff like the Orville and just never apologize for that. And I'm like, you're trying to act like you write good representation. And it said like, I think you at one point said that video, like that episode was like one of the most kind representations of trans people on TV at the time. And I chose that because I have a personal level of like extra anger towards that specific one.
Or maybe, but that's just a reflection of how bad TV was.
Yeah, and also like it was relatively more recent than something like what's that one film with Jim Carrey? Ace Ventura.
Was it Ace Ventura 2? Was that the
I
one?
think it is. And it's awful. It's horrible.
Yeah.
I don't want to talk about it in detail. I just want to like there's so many instances of that. Like I grew up with a lot of British comedy, and someday I'll talk about it. But like British comedy and the man in a dress joke have a long history. It pops up all over the place, and often is as direct as something like The Family Guy or Ace Ventura in being transphobic and being specific about it being about trans people, but like it still reinforces an idea of like someone who is perceived as a man wanting to be women as this gross, ridiculous thing to be laughed at. Is the same. It's the same message, even if it isn't as like explicitly saying trans people.
If I'm going to do something I never thought I would do, I am going to actually defend the Ace Ventura thing, because it is very contextual to its time. It was making fun of a very specific scene in a very specific popular movie, The Crying Game, which almost none of my queer people have seen for reasons I can't fathom, because
I really strongly disagree with that argument.
Yeah, to be fair, I do too.
There is no.
It doesn't hold up. It doesn't hold up because the context is gone.
But the joke is that the Crying Game is vile and
disgusting. Okay, but what I'm saying is that it was vile and disgusting at the time. It affected people at the time negatively.
Well, yeah.
So I don't in general, like even if you give all the context in the world, it doesn't for me matter that much when we discuss the art as it exists now. And
as it exists now is terrible, but as it existed then, it was making fun of the people who had that kind of reaction. But it's hard to get that from the context of now.
But even in the context of then, like what a lot of that film hurt a lot of young trans people.
Yeah, I'm sure.
And so
I was a young trans person, so
yeah, even with the context of that, I don't think it makes it any better.
Okay, now I'm way out on the outside here, but my 2 cents worth is that the harsh humor is not what I view as being the crux of the problem. It's the harsh humor and the absolute absence of positive and casual representation. There's no, if there's a trans person, they're either already the murder victim or they soon will be, or they are the surprise villain for the piece, or they are that there's no casual and there's no positive representation, And that means that if you do humor about it, it's not funny.
But it's not about funny. Like, the message of that scene, regardless of any additional context, is this person being trans is disgusting. That is the entire message of the scene. There is no amount of additional context which will change that element. Right? Like, the villain of the piece is a surprised trans person, and everybody reacts by puking. That is the scene. There's no realm in which, like, any amount of additional context makes that okay, in my opinion.
I'm serious about the context of the time, and because I was there, you know, and I got what it was trying to do, and I didn't think it was funny, if I recall. I don't know. I was on my honeymoon when I saw Ice Ventura, of all things. But I do recall knowing the context. Because I had seen The Crying Game fairly recently to that, which is as you do.
But that context doesn't make it viral. But we're going too much on this, and they're very clear.
It changes what the scene means.
No.
It doesn't.
It does.
No,
See, I'm not even familiar with it.
Like,
It changes what the scene meant. What the intention of the scene was.
I don't care what the intention was.
The effect is not good. I'm giving you that, but the intention was not.
Well, you don't know the intention of the authors.
Something else.
I mean,
Okay, this is
even
swiftly
if I
reaching
know
the point I'm going to have to go watch this movie.
Don't. It's bad. It's horrible. Like, it is truly one of the most vile fucking scenes in film. Like, it is absolutely unacceptably disgusting. Like,
Okay, so don't give them my nickel.
yeah, I wouldn't even
Do
bother
whatever you
pirating
want
it.
illegally. I cannot say anything about the nature of those actions.
But The Crying Game is well worth watching, though, for its very much a snapshot of that time.
I just want to comment that I sincerely doubt that there's any possible jokes that would be worth. You've got to watch this movie first before you can watch the other movie and get the joke.
I know.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's
Wasn't Crying Game was mentioned, disclosure. Wasn't Crying Game also the throwing up, but it was a more dramatic throwing up? You're disgusting.
Crying Game was considered quite bad by trans people at the time too. So.
no, because to give spoilers for a movie that they said don't reveal the second half. But no, he spent the rest of the movie. The guy spent the rest of the movie trying to apologize for it. So that was the surprise to me, was the trying to apologize for it instead of having that reaction. Aaron?
That being said, relativity, queerness. Let's get back to the queerness before look,
You think maybe we've drifted too far?
I do agree that with the queer relativity, that it does, like, context does to some degree change how you view things. Like the desperation was more obvious for me. Like, if I look back to 2005-ish, which was before I knew I was trans. I mean, that despite having constantly pretended I was a pregnant woman off and on since teenage years. But it's very clearly the context of me essentially wanting the equivalent of bottom surgery to be better at martial arts because it gets rid of a weakness, bottom surgery.
Yeah.
Is really just what was more desperation to make justified excuses for not being trans. And I don't know, I guess knowing yourself to some degree always makes everything different when you think back on it. Or changing your thoughts. Maybe? I don't know. I'm trying to bring things back.
One of the unsolved things is why I went back in the closet in 1982. Because I came out then. And I don't know why I went back in. I think as I've been pouring, because my diaries don't say it. But a strong memory of it is seeing or a friend of mine, just as I was debating whether to come out like more in school, which I went to an art school, so it was okay-ish. Was seeing a friend of mine getting a magazine where they showed somebody who had the bottom surgery, and the bottom surgery just looking so wrong back then. So I'm like, okay, that's never going to be, this is not something for me. I'm going to have to, although I wound up in trans spaces all through the years, 85, I'm in Boston at a convention and I hang out with the trans people,
Yeah.
And I knew trans people before 1980. Yeah. And what Pose is, that show, that's the thing that brought it, that dredged up a lot of my history, because we had the houses and all that. And did enlarged queer found family, and I always felt like I was on the fringes of it because, yeah, okay, I'm bi and although some of those people are still family to me, so those that survive. And of course, there's the queer temporality of okay, I'm still friends with all my ex-girlfriends, and all my ex-boyfriends are dead.
Yeah. No,
so, this is,
as I cover in 11.5 of the video, like a lot of temporality alteration gets affected by trauma directly, and particularly trauma related to death. If you ever seen, like, there's a lot of writing that people do often when they lose someone, where they talk about the period of time after they've lost someone, how time feels different. You could probably define a term like grief temporality or something, but I think when a large enough trauma occurs on a communal sense, it has that type of effect for a very, very long period of time. And
Yeah, the generational trauma type thing.
kind of. I mean, it is similar to generational trauma. Generational trauma is a little bit different in that, trauma is literally passed genetically, which is a fun thing they've been finding in research recently. So if your parents are traumatized, you probably have genetically inherited some of that trauma, because trauma gets encoded into the physical in a way, which is why there's a lot of evidence for potentials related to like genetic memory and stuff, that people are looking at because of that research. Yeah. So often, like if your parents have PTSD, you have a much higher rate of probably having PTSD, and it isn't even necessarily if you experience any trauma yourself, like that can happen. But the other side of generational trauma is often then also traumatized people may enact certain negative behaviors or whatever because of their trauma, and that can also pass trauma on generationally. And so I think a lot of marginalized groups face dealing with generational traumas, where we're not just dealing with the traumatic occurrences of right now, but all of the echoes of every previous traumatic occurrence and an event. And that carries forward until it is confronted and dealt with and healed from. So I do actually think there's a lot of comparisons that you could make in conversations about, let's call it communal generational trauma, and the generational trauma that occurs within families, blood or otherwise.
Well, because you're already taught what people supposedly think about you, so you're already primed for trauma.
To have one of the oddities about the way some of the queer community thinks that the queer community thinks about trans people, which is a difficult sentence to parse, I'm sorry, but is that a lot of the gay men elders aren't there.
Yeah. A lot of that history, living history, is gone.
Which you also touch on in your video, which people should watch after this. It is one of the two links. I did link a few because you mentioned. So I don't think you're on Twitter anymore. I didn't know where else to link you. I can add another one.
I deleted my Twitter. I'm a computer scientist, which naturally makes me a paranoid weirdo with tech. You will never meet a more paranoid about tech people than computer scientists, because we know too much about how this stuff works. So there's a lot of stuff with as Twitter was going down. I can just talk about this briefly, but with Musk and Twitter going down, is that Musk fired technical teams, which make me highly question whether any data is safe on Twitter anymore. Like, no matter what, if you choose to use any form of social media, you've given up your privacy. Like, your privacy's gone, doesn't exist.
Yeah.
Pretty much just existing on the internet requires, to a degree, significant loss of privacy. However, it's W you know versus W you don't. I don't really I hate it, but there's nothing I can do about it. With large corporations are going to have access to my data. That's just reality. Right. The data of how I interact with things, the data of things I like, the things that I say, probably because they definitely listen in on devices. But what I'm not comfortable with is Timmy the neo-Nazi hacking Twitter and getting my data. And
There
when
are
you
a
have
lot
no
of neo-Nazis on Twitter.
and if you don't really have any security team left, I don't trust that any of that data is safe. Second layer of it is that I don't trust that Elon wouldn't sell that data to really shady people. And then three is just the website's just going to stop functioning. So I'd rather leave on my own terms than just like wake up one day because again, he fired a bunch of the technical teams. I saw someone talking about this on Tumblr briefly, but I think I can, and I added something to it, which is someone was saying like, oh, it's a bit like the Titanic. The Titanic hasn't hit the iceberg yet, but we're full steam ahead in the middle of the night. And yeah, it's that to a degree, but it's more like, what if you got rid of every life raft? You destroyed the brakes on the machine. You pushed all of your like primary crew that could do anything to help people off the side of the boat. And then you went full steam ahead, not just towards an iceberg, but into a minefield that also has icebergs. With no binoculars, no equipment, like nothing. Just right into the abyss. That is what Twitter is right now. So I kid you not, it's a matter of percentages when too many fires break out because they fired all the firefighters. Like they fired everybody that fixes any sort of problems that will affect the website continuing to function. So anyone who does a large scale DDoS attack, which, every couple of months there usually is one against large corporate websites, right? Like Twitter will sometime probably, I give it a month since Musk took over. I think I underestimated how good their automated systems were based on some tweets from some members of their own teams, or they've just gotten lucky. But I would say within 2 months of the date that Elon Musk took over, you're just going to wake up and Twitter will not function. The website just won't work. And they won't have the teams to fix it.
That sounds about right. The only reason I'm still on along with other websites is because
the Ozma just stopped in mid-sentence again and isn't coming back.
Sorry, it dealt with chat. Don't mind me.
One of the reasons I'm so open about where I live and what my dead name is because it's much less intriguing to try and dox me than. It's one of the weird characteristics of the internet. I had more doxing information about me before I started on the net than when I just said, no, screw it. This is who I am. This is where I live. Ask, come to Buffalo, ask around. You'll find me.
My concern with doxing isn't heavily about myself. It's I worry more about my family members. I have a younger cousin who's trans, for instance. I would worry that they would try to, target them. I have younger siblings, and I worry more about it affecting all that stuff. I also worked as a coach for a long time, and so if far-right groups and whatever got a hold of my information, they would probably go after any organization that I've worked for just because I'm a trans person that worked with kids. So it's it's not even that I'm like I wouldn't want to get doxxed. I wouldn't get the potential of them trying to do something physically to me to happen, but I'm not that concerned about that specifically. I think my main concern is more other people around me getting harmed because I decided to be loud and out and talk about certain things that make people upset on the internet.
Yeah. What I was gonna say, sorry, dealing with the tech side of things a little bit, just because I happen to be faster with it. Anyways, the only reason I haven't left Twitter is because there are still people who I don't have any other thing set up well, and I know there are people who still try to get help that they need through GoFundMe's and Twitter, and that's the main reason I'm still on Twitter, so I can give that a chance while it's up. And I know Twitter's going to die, and I have backups, or I've got different types of accounts, but that's the only reason I'm still on Twitter, honestly.
Yeah. I'm gonna agree with what Perfict just said in the chat of, in some ways, trolls are a perverse measure of success. Yeah, I mean, to a degree, like, I think it's fucked that we all just kind of accept this is how things are, to a degree. I mean, there's nothing we can do about it, you know, obviously. It would require changes societally, structurally, programmatically.
And this is why visibility is important for that to occur more, so that essentially the trolls are the people doing the cruel and atypical act that the average person would not agree with.
Yeah, I think a good example of how important that is and how much effect it has. Like, I think we all know, like, trans representation has increased drastically in the last, like, 4 or 5 years. Pretty much since 2016, right? And the Republicans directly blame losing in Mississippi, like, everything. They lost everything in Mississippi for the first time in, like, 50 years. They blamed it on spending too much money on attack ads against trans people. They spent more money on attack ads against trans people than anything else on their campaigns.
We were suckered in by the trans agenda. That's what did it.
So they spent so much time being cruel and shitty about us and about kids that it fucked them over voting wise, because they looked like cruel assholes, right? But that wouldn't have happened 10 years ago, to be honest. Like, yeah, and this type of manufactured hate campaign is really horrid. But the place I'm most worried about it with is England, because over there you've got fucking Keir Starmer, the most useless human being on the entire planet. Like, if anyone could lose the Labour, the entire everything, it's just Keir Starmer on his own. Like, but like, because they have such a huge manufactured, panic about trans people, which, again, large-scale polling data does show very consistently that the British public doesn't hate trans people, thinks that trans people not having care is actually cruel, like, da-da-da-da. Like, but the Labour Party, unlike the Democratic Party, and I have a lot of issues with the Democratic Party, too, to me, they are right-wing. I'm a Canadian. Like, they talk a lot more like the fucking conservatives here than they do. And like, I don't like the liberals here. I don't think they're far enough left. So I really don't love most of the Democrats. There are individuals within the Democratic Party, but I'm talking about Democratic Party as an institutional system and not a very wide range of, like, there's individuals that are fine, that are working within that system because that's the system that is available to work within. Like, well, and
also them. Like, on local levels, oftentimes people are where Democrats are further left than the people in Senate, and
like, again, not shitting on individuals that happen to run as Democrats. Talking about Democrat Party, the Democrat Party wasn't fucking over trans people because they thought it would somehow appeal to conservatives, right? Whereas the Labour Party right now is doing that, and I do think it's going to cost them the elections in England, because you actually can't give an inch to fascists ever. They're not negotiable. They're not negotiable, like, ever. There is no reasoning or negotiating with fascists, because fascism requires being unreasonable definitionally.
And fascism is its own completely interesting topic, just due to the fact that, because there's the fascists and there are the people who let the fascists do what they want, because there's people who want us dead and those are the fascists, and then there are the people who are willing to do nothing or fine doing nothing because it's not their problem in their mind. And that's a particular type of mentality with groups of people that
passive participation, which is what is necessary for it to occur. And that is exactly how fascism was written in the past. We see it currently happening in Italy again. History repeats itself.
It's almost like totalitarianism. It's almost like totalitarianism entails totality.
So, like,
one of the, I'm actually kind of heartened by the recent election here, just because fascism lost.
To a degree,
everywhere it was on the ballot.
100% context wrench. I want to be clear. Labor hates most marginalized groups, disabled people, people of color, travelers, like so many different groups. Labor's a mess as a party. These are the moments I miss Sophia, because she'd come on and just rant for a minute, a few minutes, and
I'm gonna take that as, because I still have my grief regarding her, I'm gonna take that as an opportunity for me to bio quick, so I'll be right back.
No worries. It's very frustrating, but it is good to know that things are mildly, like, worked out well in this situation. I'm glad there are some wins involved. Like, Fetterman winning was a good thing. That was a good thing.
Yes.
Having a visibly disabled senator is a huge thing to occur.
I mean,
representative. I can't remember what he is. My brain's bad at remembering American terminology, but was he running for House or Senate? I can't remember.
It's Senate, and we've had before, but they tend to be on the Republican side for reasons.
Yeah. And just a huge amount of the Republican campaign was he's too disabled to be your senator, basically. Like, there was a lot of messaging around that. And so for him to win is a renouncement of that type of rhetoric. But I think it's important to understand that, like, for neoliberalism to function, it requires fascism as a justifier.
Yeah.
And that's what worries me about the Democrats, is they're realizing that in a very conscious way. The Democratic Party's method in several instances during the campaigns was to purposefully get an alt-right candidate to win on the Republican side because they're easier to run against. And if that isn't a perfect representation of the ways in which neoliberalism justifies itself by saying, we're not the fascists, rather than giving an actual reason for their existence, I don't know what is.
I very much agree, and this is where I duck out for a minute. I apologize.
Oh no, it's all good.
It's. I will say that it makes it an easy election. It's like in the last presidential election. I pointed out endlessly that Joe Biden had been meeting the requirement for my vote in that he was not Donald Trump.
Which is
not been Donald Trump, and I expected he would continue to not be Donald Trump on into the future.
Exactly. Like, that's what I mean. Like, the Democrats are quite literally running on, we're not the fascists. Now, again, I want to emphasize, I am talking about the DNC party. There are individual candidates, which are lovely and are actually trying to do something. And they're often disliked by the same DNC that we're talking about. So, like, like, the DNC didn't particularly like Fetterman, for being honest. They probably didn't want him to win in the primary, right? So it's important to, like, examine it through these multiple layers, where it's like, I'm glad that outright fascism did not win.
Yes.
We're still on the doorstep. We're still on the doorstep. And it's frustrating because I worry that, which has happened in the past, where minor wins create apathy. or maybe it's better worded as minor non-losses. Non-losses, because I'm not sure that a lot of these Democratic candidates are necessarily wins on their own. You know, like them being in power, not really a win, but like the fascists didn't get in. That is a good.
Yeah.
So not a loss. Not a loss. We didn't get another like fascist in Senate.
Well, we have
like
one of the things, the overseers of elections in the U.S. in each state are called the Secretary of State. I know it's different for what a Secretary of State is for the, but all the election denier. Florida is a whole separate thing. We won't even discuss Florida.
Oh God,
the penis of our country.
Yeah, but some people genuinely want to have a penis, so it's not fair to those people. It's not even it. I can't even. Whatever. Sorry.
The U.S. needs bottom surgery. But the election deniers lost across the board, which that's important.
That is huge. That is something, and I mean, like, I do think that, I think the pandemic, frankly, radicalized a lot of people because it laid bare a lot of material conditions in very stark contrasts.
Yeah.
Right. It laid bare how separated the classes really are. Where, like, in the U.S., you have like poor, rich, and the truly rich who exist on another fucking plane of existence relative to everybody else. And the pandemic only made them richer. And like it really, it also showed that a lot of people who thought they had stable positions that were middle class, right, weren't stable, weren't safe within capitalism, right? Like, so it disillusioned a lot of people in those spaces, I think, from the sort of more neoliberal leaning of like, I
think there were a lot of people who thought they were middle class,
but weren't.
And and middle class means the upper class are like Mitt Romney.
Yeah.
Where Mitt Romney lives, what car he drives, so on and so forth, are totally detached from what he does to earn money. What he does to earn money has nothing to do with where he will live or where he'll buy a house or any of that stuff. That when you started to become detached from that, when where you live isn't that strongly influenced, you will live in a nice house. It may not be this house, but it will be a nice house, even if you never worked another day in your life. That's middle class. That's what middle class means.
You have to be a millionaire at
the
this
middle
point.
class.
You have to be a millionaire.
Right. There's no middle class in America. There's very, very rich, and then it goes right down to working class.
Well, and
that's how it is.
What a lot of people don't get is that, like, the middle class, lower class, whatever, their conception of that thing is isn't particularly strong structure, I'm going to say, for understanding class relations when compared to things like the understanding of bourgeoisie versus proletariat, which really highlights that, like, yeah, you know what, you can be making a couple $100,000 a year, but one, you're one bad day from being fucked, like, permanently, like, in a lot of ways, which the pandemic showed a lot of people, and two, you don't own the means of your production. So even people who are making what at one point people thought was being rich, right, like, ended up within poverty in like a year and a half, right? There are people that occurred to. And I want to be clear, they have a lot of privilege, not denying that, like, wealth doesn't give privilege or whatever. But what my point is that, like, the difference between people who are financially stable and those who are not has grown to an absolutely obscene degree that the people who are in that kind of bracket in between people who are obviously poor and people who are very obviously rich have yeah, like as you said, they've realized they're not as middle class as they thought they were.
Well, and then the other aspect of things is things people have been asking for, things people have been told, oh, that's too difficult, that's too expensive. You know, within a month and a half, oh, all of a sudden you can do work from home and do Zoom meetings and all this stuff that they kept telling you couldn't do. That would be too expensive. That wouldn't.
It would be impractical to set that up.
Yeah. And it got set up real fast when the pandemic showed, and that just showed how little effort people actually put into that stuff. They just want to make the most amount of money.
How little effort businesses were willing to put into their employees' needs.
Yeah.
Well, and speaking of needs and meeting them, the complete failing of all of the medical systems for profit, that was pretty radicalizing for a lot of people, right?
Yeah.
Like, because the GDC was like shown to be a truly political apparatus, purely, and that affected, I think, a lot of people as well. Like realizing that, like, how much of the medical system in the US in particular was fucked specifically because of capitalist reasons, because it was so stark in contrast with a bunch of other places in the world that had socialist medical systems. And a lot of places didn't handle it well. Canada handled it like shit. Part of that was American pressure, but part of it wasn't. A lot of it was just, neoliberal apathy and also desire for profit. Especially like year 2 onwards of the pandemic, I would say Canadian handling has been more about problems with Canada than problems. But like initially, we couldn't close borders to the US, and all of our initial cases came from the US, and we couldn't close the borders because the American government, this is still Trump at the time, very briefly, right, was like threatening us if we didn't keep the borders open as they had been.
And of course, nearer to the end, or near to the year two, the astroturf of the U.S. going in and making Canadian truckers all riled up.
Oh, yeah.
You said astroturf, and I thought you were talking about turf.
If you want an explainer of the far right brigade of less than 4% of truckers in Canada that acted like a bunch of asshats, and drove around to different cities assaulting people. I know about a dozen different people personally who were assaulted by that, by the way, like in grocery stores and shit. Like, it is wild. There's a lot that wasn't reported, like in the news and stuff, that the trucker freedom convoy did. That I heard about just from personal things, like random people's like, oh, my cousin was at the Safeway in, tiny town, whatever, and Safe as a grocery store. And like, they had a mask on, and some of those convoy people like kicked the shit out of them. Like, this was, so yeah, but basically it's just a far right goon squad of jackasses that pretended like it was about trucking things, even though every single major trucking union and 96% of truckers were like, no, we already got back. Sorry, it was 94%. I swapped the 4 and the 6. 94% of truckers were already vaccinated and didn't care. Like, yeah. It was literally just the most fringe group ever. But if you want a really good video on that, We're in Hell did a video semi-recently that covered the entire trucker convoy thing. But yeah, like, and a lot of them had stuff like full on, swastikas and Nazi flags and stuff. Like, it was.
Yeah, I saw a video that was debunking the notion of the peaceful truckers, pointing out that it was the crime statistics that followed them. Yeah, all over, and that there was a crime wave that just followed.
Oh yeah. There was. And then, certain politicians tried to use that crime wave to attack other things. I love my country. That was a joke. Sorry. I do not love my country. It's...
But back to gender relativity. I feel like, I realize we're past the hour mark, but this has been kind of all over the place, and partially I'm going to blame myself, as I always blame myself about everything.
Yeah.
I have to be kept on topic, or I will.
Yeah, I'm terrible. I wanted to go back to comics, so.
No, it's.
I'm having to keep so many different timelines.
I think there's so much. I guess I don't know. I guess people there's this whole attitude that everything is simple, even in terms of who you are. I feel like a lot of society tries to avoid the self-reflection that causes things to be weird, with regards to gender and other stuff.
I would say that neoliberal social constructs actively discourage self-examining for dozens of complicated reasons. One, and I find this happens quite a lot, is personally, just because I do partially make my work so that people who know me personally can experience it and things. And so like I've had impacts on people I know personally, so I can speak to that. I'm sure it's affected people online based in comments and whatever, but that trans people just existing and like people getting to know us forces them to start examining the constructs and assumptions that society is based on, right? And it's all interconnected, right? Like you can't really combat capitalism without combating patriarchy, without combating white supremacy, without there's all these layers that all connect together, and that's why intersectionality is so important, because you can't really understand patriarchy if you don't acknowledge race, ableism, and disability, like all these other things that layer on top of it, right? Or queerness. And that's why I think fundamentally anything that came out of the white feminist movements, which includes TERFs, like TERFs are a splinter group of that. That's where they came from. Are so flawed is because they're always restricting their lens to singular axes. And it's like trying to get a good comprehension of a 5-dimensional graph, like it from like 2 dimensions or 1. Like,
yeah, I'll go draw this 5-dimensional graph.
Sorry. Like nth dimensional math is something that I really enjoy. I'm really good at proofs. It's part of my degree. So like I think about terms and but it's basically thinking about it like having 5 variables and then trying to understand all of them by looking at one.
I only did single variable calculus. I don't believe in this multivariable stuff.
Yeah, so it's like I think I like that metaphor just because it illuminates like how obviously incorrect your conclusions are always going to be if you're only ever looking through one thing. Right?
Yeah, and I think like the first thing that comes to mind is bell hooks. I know it's talked about the problems with certain aspects of white feminism and how it allowed people to just hire white women to avoid hiring black people and stuff like that.
Yeah, and like similar things happen with other intersections, right? Only hiring abled women so you can ignore disabled women. Only hiring cis women so you can ignore trans women. Only hiring white trans women so you can ignore BIPOC trans women. Like that's that's just one example of those things, but it's so we have to approach it with that sort of holistic engagement. God, I fucking love the word holistic. It's such a fun word. But it's also just it is the accurate term.
I'm stuck on empathy because someone who commented on the video that I was just describing my experience with Outlast, because it was a different experience, and I started to essentially empathize with the people in the asylum that you're supposed to be afraid of, and it just killed all elements of horror and just changed the game completely. But like someone brought up radical empathy, which is empathy and radical empathy are what my brain's stuck on at the moment, because it looks like a good way to cut through a lot of elements of stuff.
Yeah, no, it is.
Okay.
It's
I'm going to offer a little explanation which kind of ties a couple things together.
Okay.
People who do the trolling and things like that, an awful lot of that, 80%, 90%, those are people who have trouble forming a positive image. Positive image doesn't mean a good image. Positive image means I am this. What they end up doing is they find something that is not generally socially acceptable, and they say, I am not that. And it has to be not socially acceptable, because the easiest way to say you are not that is to denigrate that.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what they're doing with the trolling. Now, you'll notice that the Republican Party runs on frequently no platform. They have nothing that they've come up with a positive image. They only have negative image that they can create by denigrating something else. And that's partly because that's who they are, and partly because that's who they're selling to, is people who don't have positive images.
I disagree with defining them as I disagree with defining political view as fundamentally coming from who you are as a person, if it's some sort of it's essentialism. I disagree with essentialism at the baseline. But I do think that often people build up assumptions about how the world functions. I'm a logician. It's just so I'm going to explain what I mean by assumptions and premises before I continue, because otherwise it won't make full sense. But assumptions are things we don't have already proven true, but we believe are likely to be true or might be true. Now, sometimes in proving, you purposely make assumptions that you know are going to be untrue because you haven't proven they're not untrue yet, so you have to go through the process. It's the whole thing. But point being, assumptions are statements about the world that need supporting. And premises are the things that we have gone, this is a thing already in our logic world. Again, logic isn't some magical moral way of functioning. Logic is a representation of how human brains think. It's a very important distinction. Because a lot of people think thinking logically means they are being morally correct and geniuses and whatever. And no, because what your premises and assumptions are what will actually dictate your outcomes. Garbage in, garbage out is a concept that's really important to machine learning, which is a huge area of my expertise. But because if you have bad data, you train it, you get bad results because your assumptions about the world are wrong, your premises about the world are wrong. But often what people struggle with dealing with the far right and things is that they think that it's worth arguing with their conclusions because they assume that their conclusions are just a fault in logic, that they have the same premises and assumptions, right? And they don't. Often, what people think, so people think that like, oh, X bigot hates trans people because they have false data, they have false understandings, whatever, and that's leading to this false conclusion. When often what it is that they have a premise about the world, like trans people are horrible or whatever, something like that. That'll be their premise. That they believe that is already true, right? And so then they start making assumptions and things, and anything that disagrees with that just gets disproven automatically. And so when we just exist in a way that fights with those premises that they have about how the world functions, about life, the universe, and everything, we are fundamentally, and unintentionally, we're not doing anything active, right? But for them, we are in a way attacking them. When really core held beliefs are proven incorrect or have contradictory data presented to them, human beings respond to it in the same way that they do to fight or flight instances. So we respond to it like a physical threat, which means that a lot of the reason like that trans people experience certain types of violence, the violence that I've experienced, right, is that for these people, we're an affront to basically their brains ability to function and understand the universe. Like it is an assault on the premise, because me just being a kind, chill person that exists, right? That is an assault on that premise that trans people are all, demons coming to get babies or whatever bullshit the Republicans have said this time. And
well, that's okay. You're one of the good ones.
and I was about to say, and that is how a lot of them start reconciling aspects of that, right? Is that they'll try to find some other conclusion that like incorporates the contradictory data, most likely. So, like, they'll make someone one of the good ones, or they'll just say that they'll never be good enough. And frankly, every single one of the good ones eventually will become, just kidding, you're not good enough.
Yeah.
That's the whole Twitter thing, or Twitter/Facebook thing of the TRAs versus the rational trans people. And I've gotten we probably don't mean you, but we mean all these other. I'm like, no, you mean me, because I'm in there slugging it out as just like everybody else, you know?
Well, and even how the concept of rationality gets applied is gendered at a baseline. How people interpret people is colored by forms of relativity, right? Colored by their understandings of gender. And so a man and a woman could both correct, like, I'm going to create a hypothetical, but a man and a woman could both correct a person on the same thing, and with the same words said in the same cadence. And just because one of them is a woman, the person would receive it as less rational.
Yeah.
And it's...
I saw like a quote of someone doing that exact thing, same thing, about talking about how his wife or whatever kept correcting him, and she being like irrational, but she was always right was right a lot of the time for some reason.
Yeah, no, it's really truly like, and it's also important to understand that a lot of Republicans will not allow us the political power of the word women, but do recognize us as women. And that's where a lot of trans misogyny comes from, is the simultaneous like treatment as both an object to do misogyny to, and also at the same time deny their womanhood and personhood as well. And like, and this isn't even reaching very far. Fuck tons of Republican politicians I know for a fact have hired trans. I'm trying to find the right word that won't like negatively impact us on. Is sex worker okay on YouTube? I don't fucking know. But anyway.
Oh. Yeah, we're past the swearing time. Whatever.
Yeah. Anyway. So sex workers. Just because of like mutual aid stuff and things that I've done, I know a fair number of people in the sex work industry and a variety of different things. Mostly because I just met with Xander Corvus, who's a friend of mine, and also a famous porn star, which is a weird thing to say. I'm very ace for context. It's just very funny that I know a lot of sex workers because I have no real relationship to their work. But just because of mutual aid stuff, I've become friends with a lot. So yeah, I can tell you with direct proof that a lot of Republican senators and things absolutely do see us as women. They just can't allow us the political power of acknowledging our womanhood, because to do that would damage their rhetoric and their control, their power, right? Women as purely viewed through a lens of sexual gratification for men, and also as like producers of babies. I would remind that Republican senators have, and I quote, said that banning abortions was a victory for the white race. That is an actual thing that a Republican senator said on the Roe v. Wade banning. That like a lot of it is about control and power, and especially with those figures. Followers less so. I think followers do genuinely just hate us, but like a lot of the political power positions, it's more about who gets the power or what control gets gained by playing a language game, you know?
Well, yeah, I've got two things to add to that, and I'm trying to decide which one to pick. So I'll just get to whichever one I remember again first. I guess so. The thing is there are so many things conditioned in society, and like I and that are just not instinctively undone, and there's never like a simple there's never a simple solution. I mean, the concept of an ideal version of what it means to be human is like a weird philosophical presupposition that, if you think about it too hard, is just like, ideal for what? Like what like what, you know, why does what a human can do actually matter? Isn't just like existing fine enough? But I think the other thing is just the ethics of it all, because I took a tiny bit of ethics because I had to for when I was originally going for I can't remember the name of the degree, not microbiology, whatever, I can't remember. It's something related to biology, but also involved ethics in terms of changing plants or whatever. Yeah. I don't know. The thing is, it's like, just from an ethical level, you can be talking and you can have points that just completely don't matter. It's like, it's like, oh, you know, it's a problem being cruel to them. Yeah, why does it matter? We can create like a powerful nation of strong individuals. Like, why do I care what happens to the people who can't fight or have kids? It doesn't actually influence the power of a nation in terms of militaristic power.
No, and like, it's so important to understand things through lenses of control and power and things. I think a lot of people, when they don't engage politically, like even people who want to be anti-capitalist, often end just like, capitalism bad because they're trying to make profit, and it's like, no, because they're not actually trying to create profit. They're trying to make power. You want to know what some of the most efficient ways of having high profits are? Low work hours, high amounts of rest, high pay, because their productivity goes significantly up. The quality of the product goes up. Like, all of these, if you treat your workers really well, you will actually get higher quality work out of them in less time.
Yes.
And this has been heavily proven. If you want to get rid of drug problems and thus create more people that spend money in society in ways that make you money, you get rid of homelessness. It's the fastest way of dealing with like a dozen other problems. It also lowers the strain and expense on medical systems, right? It, like, all these things that if it was just about money, we would do. But it's not just about money. If everybody's exhausted all the time, they can't try to, it's hard to organize a union if you're working 80 hours a week and dead tired.
Yeah.
Right? It's hard to imagine better futures when your imagination is too tired to even function. That is part of it. It's control. It's all control. It's all stacks of control layered down. And the instant you start distancing from trying to understand anti-capitalism through a purely like monetary lens, which I think way too many young people do, like they get kind of.
Sorry,
they get part of the
eventually
problem.
I'm like, that feels weird coming from you. Way too many young people. Like, you're younger than you're like 10 years younger 15 years younger than me. I'm like,
yeah, but also like I don't know. I've always been a weird person age-wise. Like, yes, I'm young, but I often get treated as way older than I am. It's been bad and good, right? But also just that, like, I've worked professionally as a coach since I was 13. I've coached adults since I was like 17, 18. I'm used to being in a position of educating, including people who are like 3 times my age. I am a very weird person temporarily. So like, I see myself as a young person too. But I just often like, Okay, fuck, the majority of my friends are like years older because I just don't tend to mesh super well with people my exact age. I do with some, but just like because they're so immature.
I don't mesh with. I'm like me mentally. I don't mesh with anyone. That's not completely true. I'm usually I can one aspect of things I don't relate to with any group, and that's to some degree normal in terms of any group.
Yeah, no, and just
Like how many trans disabled Jewish people asexual people am I going to find around? And yes, I do know someone in person who is all those things as well, but that's beside the point.
yeah. Also to quickly respond to chat, I coached soccer originally. I was the youngest certified coach when I started. And then I coached rowing. I'm not going to give any more details than that just because I value the privacy around that element of my life and also the privacy of the athletes that I coached. But I have been very lucky to be in the position to, I can say the age range. I have coached people between the ages of 2 and 75. Everything in between.
That's most of us.
So I've coached most people, like pretty much every age group there is. And it is very interesting because you have to learn to, different age groups need different things. Different age groups also learn at different rates in different ways. And this is just a result of aging. Like aging affects your memory, your the way that you learn new skills is affected, but also just like temperament. Particularly older people tend to be, for a variety of complicated reasons, harder to get to you have to kind of get them to think that they did it themselves and not that you guided them to it. It's very weird. It's like
I never understood that mentality. I
know you wouldn't. Like,
I'm 57. I can't, but I can't.
I think it's more common amongst, let's say, cis rich or richer privileged. But it exists all over the place. It exists in conservative mindsets, right? I think
we are actually past time. I just looked at the time, and I'm fine with talking after the show and just continuing rambling if you want to. Words.
I guess in this last minute or two, just
okay.
Is there anything specific you want me to talk about with queer relativity? Because there's a lot I could talk about.
I'm trying to think now because I did like the, because I can get the fragmentation of time related stuff. I guess on an emotional level, because I'm autistic and some time stuff feels like stuff that happened like 7 months ago can feel like yesterday, and something yesterday can feel like a year ago or whatnot. And I wonder, on an emotional level, did that provide some inspiration for your thinking?
I mean, I absolutely think that my neurodivergence affects everything that I experience, right? As an autistic person, but also someone with CPTSD, obviously that affects that. And that was part of the point too of saying that like we have to talk about trauma as it relates to this, was to draw attention to that aspect of it, of like CPTSD means living with memories as if they're still happening to a degree, you know. like and it means existing in a weird temporality. Much earlier in the stream, I forgot to bring this up, but Questing Refuge brought it up, which is good, which is that you exist with like the whole like multiple selves thing too is the thing of you exist with the memories as they were formed by that version of yourself, but also your like recontextualized versions of those memories. You exist with multiple versions of memories, and I think that is often exaggerated by traumatic experiences. So I think emotionally, absolutely, that thing of autism where like time doesn't have as much distance between each other is an influence, which I think it's a good way of putting it. Like where something from 8 months ago can feel like yesterday. It's definitely an element. I don't know. Maybe sometime I'll talk a little bit about like, and this is an actual term. I'm sorry if some people find it offensive, but it's just I'm going off of literature from other disabled people. But cripple time or crip time, right? And I just wanted to like caveat, like some people really don't like this word being used. Some people don't mind. It's
it's complicated because there's reclamation attempts with
exactly. But I'm just
various formations. Yeah, no,
So I'm being very specific with
that
like
in
the
general.
Sources from disabled people reclaiming this and wanting the term to be used in this way. So I'm going to use it in that way. But like, yeah, I absolutely think that crip time is an element as well. As a disabled, like I'm very chronically ill. It disables me. It affects my day. And like I'm on medications that basically just allow me to function at a baseline, but like, and I'm very good at performing. I'm an actor at heart, and and that makes me. I'm a very weird disabled autistic person because one of my special interests since I was a little kid, and I talked about in the videos, is language. And so I, given the energy, mask in a particularly effective way because I'm basically just acting. It's semi-conscious and semi-unconscious. And the other layer of it is just also like a deep love of learning language. When I was a kid, I had to learn to talk like normal kids because I talked like a weird little erudite, like 1800s aristocrat. Like I was very sophisticated in my, language, and I purposefully talked as like I'm exaggerating a little bit, but like I would pull out those words that are I basically sounded like I swallowed thesauruses, but it's just because I read a lot as a little kid.
See, now I'm just picturing you doing the Dr. Manhattan thing, but going into like times where you clearly weren't alive. And back in the 1800s, I learned to talk proper. And
I can't admit online that I'm an immortal eldritch being, which is why everyone thinks I'm way older than I am. But like,
let's wrap it up. Even though
we do need to wrap it up. Sorry,
but yeah. So just
even though nothing ends, Adrian, nothing ever ends.
But just to finish those thoughts,
I thought that would get a better reaction. I don't know.
I don't know the reference. I'm sorry.
It's the last words in Watchmen.
Right. It is. Sorry. I read through Watchmen like way earlier in the year, and then I mostly just was focused on that one chapter. So I've read that chapter a billion times
for years. I haven't read Watchmen in years. Oh dear. It's such a good novel too. Anyways.
So I think all those things are interconnected and overlaid. And again, it's that thing of holistic engagement with many identities simultaneously. And I just it was an interesting, very introspective writing process. A lot of it was just sitting with myself, and some of it was not comfortable. Like I hope I conveyed those elements, but like especially chapter 11 was taking a rather critical and unflinching look at myself and my own issues. I wanted to get across the idea that trauma didn't make me this big, strong, whatever. You know, it eroded me into a spiteful little monster.
Yeah.
And I've had to learn to uncreate that. You know, I've been blessed that none of my abuse came from my direct immediate family, like my parents and my siblings, but I have had most of my childhood and a fair bit of my adulthood be characterized by these relationships, and part of that is having to reconcile with the fact that ways in which I was manipulated, but whatever, came from, you know, those people also having been through traumatic events and their own experiences with harm and abuse. Because I think that I'm trying to be very careful with how I word this, because it is skirting near, but is not actually, like, it's skirting near the, like, oh, you got a personal responsibility shit. But like, that's not like the point that I'm trying to make, which is, it's more just that, like, you are responsible to a degree with how you respond to those impulses, those things that you learned to survive. And it's fucking hard to word that in a way that doesn't come across bad. I get that.
I know what you're talking about.
It's hard to talk about because I think it's so near the language of, like, victim blaming that often happens. And I'm not talking about that. I'm very, very much not wanting to talk about that. I think I know you all on the call understand me. I just don't want to be misunderstood audience-wise.
That being said, we are moving towards the end.
Yeah,
I'm going to start with you. Where can people find you? Is there anything that you're working on?
You can find me on Tumblr, on TikTok, on Patreon, on YouTube at Aranock. Nice and simple. Aranock.
Tumblr.
It's me. It's just Aranock everywhere.
Yeah.
And it's nice and simple. Like, you just look me up on those websites with that name, you should be able to find me. I'm currently working on a couple of things. Some of them I won't talk about what was announced to my Patreon, and some of them are public stuff. The public stuff is, because Jesse already revealed this, Jesse Gender and I are doing a three-piece series on Star Wars and politics, which is going to be very good. I'm very excited about that series. For context, I've had a special interest in Star Wars since I was 3 years old, so I'm very knowledgeable on this topic. I'm remastering / doing a sequel / reimagining my Tron Legacy video. The original one is just plagued with technical issues because I was using Shotcut at the time, and it, like, stopped functioning. Like, every single line of dialogue has a different sound level. It's awful. So then I went back to, like, I was like, oh, maybe I'll just recreate it, and then I significantly rewrote it. It's a drastically different video now. But I'm also going to cover Tron and Tron Uprising and probably some of the video games. Maybe Kingdom Hearts, probably Kingdom Hearts for Lady Night from Canada's sake, because they love those games. I'm just going to cover all the Tron media with a queer lens. It's going to be very fun. It's very aggressively anti-fascist. I'm loving this script. I have some lines in there that are just bangers.
Okay.
Well,
I'll make sure to be. Whatever. Make sure to watch it when it shows up, or whenever it's convenient for me. I don't know where I was going there. I almost said I'll make sure to be hyped for it, like I'm forcing myself, and that's not the case. I genuinely like your content. Is that it?
That's everything I want to say publicly. I'm probably doing a Christmas video, but I don't know what it's about yet. I mean, I have an idea. We'll see. I have to do it's one of those writing is kind of just a process, and sometimes you think of it and sometimes you don't. But I want to do a sort of sequel to my Christmas video from last year, which was a very fun, very weird video about Black Friday and capitalism as a Cthulhu-esque being that. Anyway, it's fun. It accidentally predicted the war between Russia and Ukraine.
Oh God!
I'm not kidding. There was a comment where someone was like, "What the fuck?" And I was like, "I was just saying things." Anyway, if you do material analysis, if you get mistaken for a prophet.
Yeah. Christy, where can people find you, and is there anything you're working on?
You can find me on Twitter if I ever decide to go back on.
And assuming that Twitter doesn't die before you decide to try to go back on.
We had an electrical fire and we were without electricity here for 5 days.
Oh
no.
So since I do not have Twitter on my phone, I only
Which
have
is
it on
healthy.
my PC. Yeah. I don't have Facebook or Twitter on my phone, and I only have Discord for purposes of signing, links. If I ever decide to get back on, but anyways, Power was back on last Saturday, and I still haven't gone back and looked at Twitter at all. But I'm at Christy L Abbey, CHRISTY LABBEY. And I am working on something where I don't know. I'm reading a lot. I'm reading a lot of 1950s crime and horror comics, and thankfully most of them are public domain. But I am not entirely adverse to, that. Okay. Sorry, I wanted to bring up something relevant to Watchmen earlier, so I had that sitting there. I figure.
Yeah, the black. It's called. My brain's too tired right now. Sorry, but the pirate sections of Watchmen are based off of some very specific pulp comics like that.
Yeah, this has been a project. I just added another 1,300 books to my comics to my reading. So it's like I'm autistically thorough.
Okay. And Perfict, where can people find you?
Here, Discord, Rumpus Room, Fluid Voice Discord, and my comment and takeaway from the evening is logic is not magic. It is a language that is used for truth preserving, for checking the truth preserving of statements.
It is data representation. It is actually the basis data representation that we use in computers. It is data representation. It is data pathway representation. It is how people get to conclusions. But the problem is that most people have no idea what their assumptions, premises, or even their conclusions are. Sometimes they think what their conclusions are actually the premise, and they've done it backwards, which is what most conservatives do. And the instant you start figuring that out, God, does things make a lot more sense. I'm not kidding. When I took logic classes, it was the most politically relevant thing I've ever learned.
Wait, are you saying you can't just take a presupposition and then retroactively create a premise to the conclusion?
We
Then
we don't operate on logic. We operate on heuristics. We try and say
That is
that
true.
we have logical conclusions, but our logical conclusions are based on our heuristics, and if our heuristics are picking out the wrong things, then you're
directionality matters in logic, and a lot of people's logic is backwards directionality.
yeah.
Yeah, but logic makes it
talking
sound
again?
like
There
they're
we go.
special and powerful.
Rationality is a gendered trait.
There you go.
Yeah, and you can. I'm gonna be on hiatus soon, so the last place you'll definitely find me is here for the rest of the month. I will definitely be here. That Dang Dad is going to be our guest for next week, talking about empathy. Because empathy's important.
That's a big oh boy for you.
And also I referenced him in my video because I thought he did a good breakdown on how dehumanization happens. But like, anyways, yeah, and I'll be on Twitch tomorrow, beating King's Quest 3 at, I don't know, 6 p.m. Eastern, and I'll probably just play until I beat King's Quest 3, and then I'll be on hiatus for Twitch because I've got a million other life things going on, and they all just happen to hit me at once. And also, I've got like a surgery in February, so I need to make sure I get in shape enough not to get rejected in the pre-op, which will be a month before the surgery. So it's like 2 months ahead of time. I feel like I need to go all Marvel actor on my physical health. Anyway, yeah. With that said, your voice matters, your life matters, and you matter.
Other way around.
Darn it.
There's a reason I put it in that order.
I know, and I had it right for like a lot of this year. I had it right. I was doing well, and now I'm back messed on a weird order.
The Madonic. Love.
What?
Life, you, voice.
Oh, yeah, your life matters, your voice matters, and you matter.
Yep.
No.
Okay. Wait.
No, that's right.
Yeah.
That's
it.
This is reason.
Bye,
I don't know why I
everybody.
don't
Take
say
care
it.
of yourselves. Have a
Have a good
wonderful
one.
weekend or night or
Live
Thursday
long.
evening. I don't know when you're going to watch this.